But there's also a sense that heaven, in the Bible, it's called the kingdom of God. And the kingdom of God is where we're all headed eventually through the reincarnational process as we become perfect by coming back over and over and over again and learning the lessons.
Okay.
We eventually enter that state where all those who have become perfect now live. The masters of wisdom, the great white brotherhood, the disciples of the Christ himself, all these individuals who have gone ahead of us live in that state of brotherhood and that state of unity and love, which is also known as the kingdom of God, which is where we're headed eventually.
So do we go there and hang out, or is there work to do there?
There's lots of work to do. When you get into heaven, actually, you've got a lot more work to do than you do now when you don't experience it.
So you don't float on a cloud and play a harp?
You don't float on a cloud. The idea, our souls come into incarnation, come into these bodies because it has a purpose. And that purpose is to serve the plan of God. As we evolve, we become more aware of what that plan is. We become more aware of our part in that plan.
Yes.
So as we become perfect and learn everything that Schoolhouse Earth has to teach us,
right,
we want to participate in that plan more, and we can take on more of that plan to ourselves and manifest our part in helping that plan to become a reality on the earth. So we come back even after we're perfect.
So when we're done with the physical body and we become permanent spirit beings, then there's work to do in the spiritual world as well.
There's work to be done in the spiritual realm, but there's also, we come back in another body, but we don't have to resolve all the bad things we've created for ourselves. We've already done all that work and resolved our bad karma. So now we're just here to help humanity to put a hand down and lift our brothers and sisters up towards the light. So we come back or we don't come back. It just depends on what our individual destiny might be.
Okay, you said we resolve our individual karma. Is that salvation? Where does salvation fit into this?
It is salvation. Salvation is a path that we step on. As we step on the spiritual way, the spiritual existence, and start to meditate, start to study, start to serve other people, the way of salvation opens before us, and we move closer to our destiny, which is union with God, towards a certain level of consciousness and awareness. So that is our salvation. Now karma, as we come back into incarnation, like if I do something bad to you today, I have to pay for that. If I do something good to you today, I will reap the benefits of that.
Law of cause and effect.
Exactly. It says it in the Bible. Jesus says it in the Bible. Eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth.
As you sow, so shall you reap.
Now, I might not reap the benefits or the bad karma next life, but I might reap the benefits or the bad karma 3 lives from now.
Okay.
And the purpose of that is so that we eventually learn to live in harmlessness with each other. And the law of karma teaches us that eventually when you hit your head against the wall enough, you know not to hit your head against the wall anymore, and you learn and you grow and you move on and you learn new lessons.
So nobody saves you, talking about salvation, except you.
Exactly. It's all up to us. We can do it quickly or slowly. We have free will, but it's all up to us. Eventually, we're all going to the same place. Some of us will do it slower. People like the Christ have done it a lot quicker. People like the Buddha have done it a lot quicker than us.
Right.
So yeah, eventually we go, but we have free will to make it a slow process or a quick process.
To get back just for a minute to the fear of death, which is where we started this conversation, how would you suggest that people deal with the fear of death?
The best way to deal with it is not to wait till you're on your deathbed, not to wait until you're 90 years old and you haven't given it a thought your whole life, but to turn towards it in your life, in a manner of speaking. Face it, think about it, don't be afraid of it, but just, get in touch with it within oneself about what death means. Learn who you are as a child of God. Start to read the great spiritual teachers, meditate, whatever it might take that you can get in touch with that inner divinity within yourself, find out who you are, and look at what other philosophers and teachers have said about death. Read on these things, and you become more familiar with it, and the familiar doesn't hold the same sense of fear and trepidation, because it's become more of a friend than an enemy to you.
So it sounds like you're saying get to know yourself, find some kind of inward path, whether it's some kind of spiritual path or whatever it is, to get to know yourself, who you really are, that you're a spirit, not a physical, not just a physical body.
When you know who you are, you know that this world is transient. You know that your relationships are not permanent. You know that you're not your job or your house or your car. All these things pass away. And you focus on what is permanent, which is that soul of yourself, that inner spark of God. That's what's permanent. And when you get in touch with that, the world can come and go, or people can come and go. I mean, you may miss them because we're all human, but you know that nothing in this world lasts. And that the real part of us, whether we're in the body or out of the body, the real part of us lives on. So that's the number one call.
Is get to know yourself, who you really are.
Who you really are as
Right.
a spirit, as a soul. Yes.
Right. Then the other thing you said is get educated about what people have said about death, what knowledgeable people have written. I would assume that might include even reading books by people like Dr. Raymond Moody, who's talked about near-death experiences and talked to people who've actually died.
Yep. People who've had those near-death experiences have come back. There's lots of more and more books out all the time now of research into this whole prospect of reincarnation and that sort of thing. All these things, I mean, there's a fellow professor at University of Virginia, Ian Stevenson, who's been doing research for years about where he goes to these countries, say India or Lebanon, and he interviews children who remember all these details about a previous existence. And he can verify that because the people of that previous existence for that child are still there, and they can name their parents, they can name where they live, their brothers or sisters, all these sorts of things that he has researched that these children talk about. So there's things like that that are going on in other scientific studies which are proving more and more that there's more to life than just this physical world that we see, that there is a consciousness within us that has a life outside of this body. And these sorts of things can help us get more familiar with the prospect of death and thereby lessen our fear of death.
Very good. I also want to talk just for a moment about people who have suffered the loss of a loved one. They're going through grief and loss, tragic losses sometimes. And I'm wondering what suggestion you might have for people about how to handle their grief, how to move through their grief, how to deal with that tremendous grief and suffering of the loss of a loved one.
Grief is very hard for people.
Yes.
We all have to go through it. If we don't die when we're young, then eventually our parents, our friends, old people older than us and younger than us are all going to die. I mean, we're going to be in that role sometime, but grief affects us on such a deep level that it's always there, even after time has passed, a year or two after we've lost a loved one, for instance. Will never go away. That gap will always be there. That hole that we might feel within our lives will always be there. But we have to understand that it's part of the normal process to grieve. It's normal to cry. It's normal to want to talk about it all the time with our friends. We have to understand that people we know that are grieving need to be able to talk. They need permission to know it's okay to cry. People don't get over grief in a week. You know, in our society we say, well, take a week off, come back to work in a week, and people expect you to be over it, but you're not. You still carry this with you.
Yes.